The battle AI in Generation 1 can make some very bad decisions, and sometimes it selects moves that can even softlock the game. Today we'll be analyzing the AI in Generations 1, 2, and 3 to see if it's as bad as everyone remembers. So let's go back to 1996 and see what kind of AI you can make with duct tape and safety pins. The AI in Gen 1 breaks down across 5 different categories, and the first we're looking at is the simplest, Wild Pokemon. Wild Pokemon are incredibly basic as they select their moves at random with the probabilities being roughly equivalent, and they have 2 quirks shared by all AI-controlled Pokemon we need to look at, PP and empty move slots. Each of their moves has unlimited PP, so they're free to spam them as much as they want, but what if a move slot is disabled? If the AI decides to use a disabled move, it will run the random move function until it selects one it can use, which is also true for empty move slots if the Pokemon doesn't have a complete move set. And since we're on the topic of move sets, let's look at how the AI learns moves. As its Pokemon gain in level, the moves fill up the slots until they're full, and if it needs to learn a new one, it deletes the top move with the remaining ones being shifted up and the new move being added to the bottom. But what if it already knows the new move? Looking at a level 42 Jolteon, you might expect it to know Quick Attack, Double Kick, Pin Missile, and Thunder Wave, but these aren't the moves it would actually know. With its starting moveset, we see that when it hits level 8, it will replace Tackle with Sand Attack, then skip Thunder Shock and Quick Attack since it already knows them. Double Kick replaces Quick Attack, and Pin Missile replaces Thunder Shock, so when it learns Thunder Wave, it gets rid of Tail Whip, leaving it with a slightly different moveset than you'd expect. This sequence holds true for most trainers, except for a few that sub in different moves, and with Wild Pokemon taken care of, we're now ready for the Trainer AI. Trainer AI makes up the remaining 4 categories, so let's start at the beginning with Category 1 trainers. Much like Wild Pokemon, these trainers will select their moves at random, but they do have the extra ability to not use a move if it would be redundant. So if your Pokemon is already paralyzed, the enemy Pikachu won't choose to use Thunder Wave again. This brings us to Category 2 trainers who have an interesting feature where they check out this video's sponsor, HelloFresh. If you've ever stared into your fridge not knowing what to make for dinner, try HelloFresh and choose from over 30 Calorie Smart or Protein Smart recipes that come packed with fresh ingredients right to your doorstep. If you're looking to indulge, there's nothing better than a decadent treat after a fantastic meal, and HelloFresh couldn't agree more, with new subscribers getting free dessert for life, meaning you can dive into a free dessert item with every order. Sometimes life gets in the way and we don't have time to cook a meal, but HelloFresh's assortment of quick and easy meals includes some recipes that only take 20 minutes, which lets you speedrun cooking so you can get back to doing what you enjoy more quickly. Personally, I've been satisfied with every HelloFresh meal kit I've ever received, and to enjoy America's #1 meal kit yourself, click the link in the description or use my code and get 10 free meals plus free dessert for life while subscription is active. And with that, let's get back to the battle AI in Pokemon. When it comes to Category 2 trainers, they only have a single feature that differentiates them from Category 1, and that's what they do on turn 2. Category 2 trainers will prioritize setup moves on the second turn, with setup moves generally falling into 3 categories: moves that have an effect on the user or target stats, damaging moves with a special effect, and healing moves. So why the second turn and not the first? This feature was likely intended to be used on the first turn, but the developers possibly fell victim to an off-by-1 error. There are lots of ways this error can occur, but a common method is when someone forgets that computers start counting from 0. So by entering the number 1 for the turn the AI should use a setup move, the game will actually read that as being turn 2. There are lots of weird combat bugs in Generation 1, but those are beyond the scope of this video, and it's now time to explore the hardest AI that a trainer can have. Category 3. These trainers prefer to use moves that are super effective and avoid moves that aren't very effective, but this doesn't come without its own bugs and problems. In the any % glitchless speedrun, Nidoking is the preferred Mon with a typing of Poison and Ground, but when you get to Lance, his Dragonair will do something funny. The AI sees it has a move which is super effective against Nidoking, but there's a problem. The move is Agility, which deals no damage, meaning it prioritizes a move that will never deal damage. When it comes to not very effective moves or moves the target is immune to, the AI discourages them if it has other moves it can select, with these alternatives existing in a hierarchy. Super Fang is at the top since it always deals half of the target's remaining HP, then come moves with a set damage followed by Fly, and it ends with moves of a different type even if those are also not very effective or would have no effect. In the spirit of Gen 1, no trainer AI is complete without a bug, and Category 3 trainers will sometimes select a move they consider to be super effective against dual types even if the secondary type nullifies the damage bonus. This is due to the table the AI uses to look up type effectiveness. Take the example of a Victory Bell and the AI having a Pokemon with a Poison type move. It would see from looking at the first type that Poison is super effective and decide on that move, but since the second type is Poison and it's stored later in the table, the AI never sees it. So Victory Bell only takes neutral damage despite the computer thinking it's super effective. Category 1 through 3 cover almost every trainer, which leaves us the Gym Leaders, Elite Four, and a couple sneaky trainers with special AI layered on top of them. One of the biggest advantages these trainers gain is the ability to use items. With Brock, it's quite simple, as he'll full heal any status effect you afflict him with, but the Elite Four are a bit different. Lance has a 50% chance to use a Hyper Potion if his active Pokemon is below 20% of its max HP, but Agatha has a slightly different ability. While she does have a high probability of using a Super Potion, she does have a small chance to switch out her active Pokemon mid-battle. On the extreme end of switching, there's the Juggler, who has a 25% chance of switching out their active Pokemon, which they can do 3 times on each member of their party. And there's also a bug with how the computer uses items and switches out. Normally, if a player takes either of those actions, it will always happen first no matter what move the AI selected, but the AI itself doesn't gain priority when using items or switching. This means it can take a hit before using an item or switching out, and the bizarreness doesn't end here. When an AI decides to use an item, it still runs the calculation to select a move, and it will respect the priority of that move when it uses the item. If its active Pokemon is slower than yours, it will act second, but if the move it would have selected is Quick Attack, then its priority is bumped and it acts first. The last bug we'll look at is Lorelei's Dugong, as it was so broken in red and blue that it required extra code in yellow version to fix a soft lock. If you have a poison or fighting type Pokemon and use Rage, you'll continue using the move until you or the opponent faints. And since Dugong has Rest, a psychic type move that it sees as being super effective, it will use Rest in an endless loop if you're too weak to kill it in a single hit. They fixed this in yellow by adding code that give it a high chance to ignore using a super effective move which prevents the soft lock, which brings us to how the AI selects a move in the first place. Every move starts with 10 as its priority, then calculations are performed depending on what categories the trainer has applied to it. For a trainer with categories 1, 2, and 3, it first checks to see if the target is statused, then adds a +5 to any move that inflicts a status if the target already has one. It then looks for a setup move and gives those -1 if it's the second turn, followed by type checks giving -1 to super effective and +1 to resistances, with the lowest priority moves being selected for use. And that's it for Gem 1. The key takeaway here is that complexity was added incrementally by layering small changes onto the AI, but it was easily exploited due to its simplicity, and rather than add more patchwork fixes to this system like they did in Yellow, Game Freak overhauled the entire system for Gen 2. The first thing they did was fix the priority issue when the AI tried to switch Pokemon or use items, so they'll no longer take a hit when selecting those actions, but the biggest change by far is the battle system. For Gen 2, they took the idea of layering features on top of trainer AI and turned it into a customization machine. All trainers now share a basic AI, and to give them different battle strategies, developers drag and drop other layers onto them that alter their behavior. In total, there are 10 different layers a trainer can have, and the Smart layer breaks down into 65 different sub-layers that activate if the AI has certain moves. But before we get to those, we need to look at the basic AI. Wild Pokemon and Twins will select moves at random, but for every other trainer, the root of their decision-making stems from the basic layer. It works by assigning priority scores to moves, with each move having a base score of 20. It then gives +10 to any status move if the target is already statused, then finishes by giving +10 to any move with a special effect that won't do anything, or will have a bad outcome. So it won't heal if it's full HP, and won't use Sleep Talk if it's awake. The basic layer can be summarized as trying to eliminate redundancy, but on its own, it doesn't add a lot of complexity to the AI. To achieve that, the developers add layers that run on top of the basic layer that give trainers unique flavor and capabilities. To see how this works, let's look at two examples, the Bug Catcher and a Boss Trainer. The Bug Catcher has two additional layers above basic, setup and status, with it running through the checks of each layer before selecting a move. Let's say the AI enters a battle with Butterfree using this moveset, and its opponent is a Haunter. Given that Haunter doesn't have a status, the basic layer doesn't discourage the use of Poison Powder, and it won't adjust any of the other moves. It then runs through the setup layer, where it has a 50% chance to give -2 for stat up moves and a 50% chance to -2 stat down moves while on the first turn. Otherwise, it has an 88% chance to discourage stat moves. The status layer is applied next, where it gives +10 to any move that won't affect the player due to typing, so it gives +10 to Tackle and Poison Powder. layer. This leaves Psybeam and Swagger at 20, but let's assume the setup layer succeeded in its check for Swagger and gave it -2, so Swagger would be the move selected. There are two things worth mentioning about this. There's something called the first turn clause that adjusts what the AI interprets as being the player's first turn. Let's say the player switches in a new Pokemon and uses an item. The AI doesn't count this as the player taking a turn, so the next turn would be that Pokemon's first turn as far as the AI is concerned. The second thing you might be wondering is why didn't the super effective Psybeam get prioritized above Swagger? And that's because none of the bug catcher's layers tells it to. That feature is reserved for the types layers, which is applied to some trainers. This brings us to Bosch trainers who have 6 layers stacked on top of the basic layer. 2 of these we covered with the bug catcher, so let's look at the others. The cautious layer tells it to discourage moves with residual effects after the enemy's first turn, with the first turn clause being in play, with moves like Leech Seed, Poison Powder, and Mist falling into this category. The aggressive layer slightly discourages damaging moves except for the one that deals the most, with 2 caveats. It won't adjust the priority of moves that deal no or variable damage, and it won't adjust reckless moves either, with these types of moves falling under the reckless category. The risky layer is applied to moves that are one-hit knockouts. If there's an alternative move that can knock out the player, it will greatly encourage that with -5 priority, and if the player's HP is full, it won't adjust a risky move. If the target has taken damage, it then has about a 1 in 5 chance to greatly encourage a risky move. And when calculating knockouts on moves like Explosion and Self-Destruct, it doesn't factor in crits or max damage rolls. This brings us to the smart layer, which as I mentioned previously, has 65 different sub-layers that only activate if the Pokemon has certain moves in its moveset. Obviously, that's too much to cover here, so let's look at an example using Golem versus an Arcanine. We'll assume it's beyond turn 1 and that Arcanine has taken some damage, and after the basic setup and status layers have run their checks, we're at the following priorities. The cautious layer doesn't affect any moves, but the aggressive layer adds +1 to Fire Punch and Defense Curl since they don't deal the most damage, and it ignores Self-Destruct since it's classified as risky. The risky layer itself has a 1 in 5 chance to greatly encourage Self-Destruct, so let's say the check fails and does nothing, which brings us to the smart layer. The smart layer has specific logic for Self-Destruct, where it +3s the move if this is its last Pokemon and the player has multiple Pokemon left on its team. If the AI has more than 1 Pokemon left, it skips that check and instead will +3 the move if the player's HP is above 50%. But if the player's HP is between 25 and 50%, it has a 92% chance to add the +3. Since the player's Arcanine is at 80% HP, Self-Destruct gets a +3, which means that Earthquake will be the move the AI selects. For Generation 2, the devs focused on giving each trainer group their own identity through customization, with the system being incredibly robust in how it can be applied, as they no longer had to worry about making patch fixes to bad AI habits, as they could just remove problematic layer combinations from a trainer to eliminate undesired behavior. However, just like they took their favorite part of Generation 1's AI and built the system entirely around layering, they did the same thing for Gen 3, eliminating the layer system and creating a smart AI for all trainers that works based on the moveset they have. All trainers now run off of a smart AI, and aside from move selection, it had a lot of functionality added around switching Pokemon out mid-battle and after a KO. In the event of a knockout, it will look for Pokemon with types that are super effective against the player and then D-rank types that it's immune to or that it resists. Mid-battle switchouts, on the other hand, occur in specific situations, so if its active Pokemon has a perish count of 1, or the player has the Wonder Guard ability and it lacks a super effective move, it will look for a switchout. This helps the AI survive in bad situations similar to how a human would play, but where this generation gains its real competitive edge is in how it selects moves. The Smart AI has 6 basic checks it runs through when appraising a move, and in this gen, the move with the highest score is chosen instead of the lowest. The first thing it does is ignore and discourage moves that would fail, so fighting moves on a ghost type or using Earthquake on a Pokemon with Levitate would both fall into this category. Next, it looks for a kill, with any move except Explosion getting a +4, and priority moves that can kill get an additional +2. If a move can't achieve a knockout, the AI slightly discourages it as long as it isn't the highest damaging move and hasn't been previously discouraged or is Power 1. The next check is performed 69% of the time, with status, Power 1, previously discouraged, and the highest damaging move all getting a bonus if they are doubly super effective. In the other 31% of the time, priority isn't adjusted on these moves, and in this gen, the AI now observes PP, with any 0 PP move getting a -100 to its priority. That's quite a bit for the Smart AI, and those are only its basic checks. Almost every move has specific logic that it runs through to determine priority, so let's look at a few interesting ones. Health restoring moves get -3 if the AI is at full HP, but if it's below full and is faster than the target, the moves get deranked even further. If it's slower than the player and its HP is 70% or higher, it has a high chance of discouraging the move. But in the small chance that check fails or it's below 70%, it has a high chance of encouraging it. Moves that provide a turn of invulnerability are quite interesting, as the AI will watch what moves your Pokemon uses and remember them. So if it knows your Pokemon has Protect or Detect, it will give these moves -1 and not run the additional checks. However, if you've never used those moves, it has a 69% chance to +1 them if any of the following conditions are true. It's faster than the player is badly poisoned or leech-seeded, or it's hailing or sandstorming and the AI is immune to the other weather effect. And you did hear that correctly, an ice type will try to stall with these moves in a sandstorm, the same with ground and rock and hail, likely a bug or oversight by the developers. The amount of moves we could cover here is endless, and remember when I said the lair system was eliminated? Well, it turns out it wasn't entirely destroyed. In particular, the lair it applies to the biggest change in this generation, the doubles battle, as it has some odd quirks. The first check concerns using moves on an ally, so Will-O-Wisp and Toxic are greatly encouraged on a teammate with the Guts ability, provided it isn't statused and has high HP. The next check evaluates skill swap, as an ally with the Truant ability will be greatly encouraged to be targeted, and allies with Thunder in their moveset while the user has the Compound Eyes ability will also be encouraged as skill swap targets. If it's considering the player as a skill swap target instead, it will be highly encouraged if the user has Truant, and slightly encouraged if the target has Shadow Tag or Pure Power, otherwise skill swap receives no changes. Earthquake and Magnitude are quite interesting, as they will only be slightly encouraged if the user's ally is immune. If it's super effective against them, it gets highly discouraged, otherwise it's at -3 priority. It's also highly discouraged from using an electric move if the target's partner has Lightning Rod, and the final check it runs is if the AI is statused and doesn't have the Guts ability, in which case it discourages Power 1 and status moves and encourages the highest damage move as well as other damaging moves. Like Generation 1, the AI also has a bug when evaluating type immunities. Take Girafarig for instance. If the AI is a ghost type, it won't see that Girafarig is immune to ghost attacks, as something breaks when it looks at its secondary type and it forgets that despite Ghost being super effective to Psychic, its normal type has rendered it immune. And that's it for Generation 3. Now that we've seen how the AI works in the first 3 games, we can answer the question of how bad it was. To casual players, you likely noticed the many problems with Generation 1's AI and may have even used exploits against Lance and Sabrina. So while this iteration may have gotten the job done, it did have many noticeable flaws. Generation 2 solved these problems by and large, and while it did have some lingering bugs from Gen 1 and new bugs of its own, like full heal not curing Nightmare, the AI worked well when selecting moves. However, each trainer group did battle in similar ways since they shared the same AI layers, so we got more strategy diversity overall, but not much within groups. Generation 3 was where the AI brought different strategies to every trainer as their moveset dictated how they battled, so 2 bug catchers could execute entirely different strategies depending on their team. So when it comes to the question of how bad was the AI, the answer is okay, better, and good, except in double battles. It's really amazing how the AI changed in the early days of Pokemon, but at least it doesn't cheat like in Mario Kart 64. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next exciting episode of Abyssoft Z.